Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. I'm your host, Lucas McCann. With us today, Michael Hoffman, founder, CEO of Gather Voices. This is going to be a good show, I can tell already. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, thank you, Lucas. Appreciate being here. Really excited to have this conversation with you today.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time. As we do, Michael, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to associations. Start there.
Sure. Yeah, it was sort of by accident that I came to associations. I started my career in political consulting actually, and then ended up in software and internet in the early days of the internet, and then started an agency. So that's really what got me into associations. I started an agency in Chicago called C3 Communications, and we focused on nonprofits, primarily charities, but then also started to have some association clients. And then when I started Gather Voices, it was just like, peanut butter and chocolate with the associations. And,
Some people like that. I can't tell whether that's an
I
oddity
think it's a
now or
good
these
thing.
days or if that's a perfect compliment.
I, you know, we what we do at Gather Voices is raise up the voices of people who are usually not in the conversation. And if you think about an association, the members are where all the intelligence lies, right? Like if you're the Dental Hygienists Association, your members are dental hygienists. So if you're doing content about that, who knows about that? It's your members know about that, right? So it was just that fact is not true in almost any other industry, right? The customers don't know more than the people making the product, but in the association industry, that's true, and that is what really led us there.
Yeah. I'm sure you knew this path like from the beginning that this was just going to be straight to Gather Voices, which happens for absolutely nobody. But if you zoom, if you zoom out a little bit, you see your background in technology, you see your background in the marketing with the agency, you see sort of the evolution of that time of the cell phone, the interaction, engagements, just like the absolute hot button over time. And was there a single moment of inspiration for Gather Voices where you just said, this is just a big opportunity, and what did that look like? Or is it something that sort of slowly ticked and evolved over time?
No, it really was that single moment. I at the agency we were very focused on video content, and we would make these videos for associations or nonprofits, and they would come to us and say, Michael, we love that video you just made for us that cost, that's a 6-minute video that cost $50,000 and took 4 months to do. But hey, the world's changing a little bit and we need lots of content, short form content, all kinds of things. Can you help us do that? And, I looked at this traditional production company that we built inside our agency and thought, I don't know how to do that. I got shooters and editors and all these things. And, so we started playing with every possible way to do that. It started with really basic, like, I'm giving you a video, I'm going to give you 3 short cuts of the same video, things like that, right? But it was sort of playing around the edges. It didn't solve things. And the aha moment for me was hearing about a film, a feature film, a movie in theaters that was made on an iPhone, the first one ever. And I thought, wow, like everyone we want on video is walking around with a professional movie camera in their pocket. Why are we sending camera crews everywhere and spending tens of thousands of dollars for everything that we need? It doesn't make sense. And so we started to then experiment with, like, if I just ask you, if I'm like, Lucas, make a video, then we realized, well, that didn't quite work either, because people were like, what kind of video do you want me to make? And how do I do it? And how do I get it? And there's all kinds of logistic issues, and there's issues around, legal rights and all kinds of things, right? So then we were like, oh, could we use technology to solve for some of those things? And that was really the birth of Gather Voices, was really realizing that there will always be a place for really high quality professional production, but we're in a world where a massive amount of video content is needed outside of that, and it has to be done in a way that's nimble and inexpensive. And how do we make that happen?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I think historically it was a balance of quality and quantity and cost and everything else, right? You were trying to put out, I think the idea was, let's put out a few short videos that were really, really high quality that we believed would stand out. And then over time, those sort of lines blurred between the quality mark. And now it's how can we increase the quantity? Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, and I think the idea, what I did too many times was spend a lot of money and a lot of time on one piece of content and then desperately hope that people would watch it and that it would have some traction and that it would actually produce something. And that's not the world we're in anymore. The things that go viral or and not even go viral, just are interesting to people or have impact, you don't necessarily know what they are beforehand. And so it's really a question of, this continual sharing, and certain things will resonate to certain people and other things won't, but you have to have that quantity there, to make it real. The other thing that's changed is the lack of trust in our institutions. When I started my career, a really highly polished video was a good thing. And today, if it looks too polished, it's not trusted in the way it is. If I'm promoting a conference for an association or membership or something, and I have like, join us, and it's this very advertising looking thing, it doesn't do half as well as just having a member say, this conference is amazing and here's the 3 sessions I went to, right? And so we're just in a much less formal world where trust has flowed to individuals more than institutions.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that right until now, but there is that notion that if it is really well polished and professional and too polished and professional, I should say, it could be kind of veiled in bias somehow, that they're trying to convince you of something, versus if it's just a member sharing some real life information in a selfie video or what have you. That's real, right? That's raw, and it's that's one opinion. So even if it is sort of has some bias, it's like, okay, that's that one person's opinion, and that's one opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you a story about that, where we were working with Make-A-Wish, and Make-A-Wish is more maybe than any other nonprofit is run by volunteers. There's staff at Make-A-Wish, but all those wishes happen because of volunteers, and they need a lot of volunteers, and they've been trying to recruit volunteers. And they had this idea that everything at Make-A-Wish has to be child-centric, and what that led to over many years was all the content essentially being the same, which is, I'm sure you've seen it, the kind of wish reveal content. It's like, oh, there's this kid, and then there's this amazing wish, and everybody's happy. And the problem with that is it doesn't help, it doesn't show any need, it doesn't show any emotion that's other than this very narrow band of stuff. And so when we were working with them, there was this volunteer who did this incredible project. He helped rebuild this house for a kid, and we were like, what's the story there? And it's like, he said, oh, I was really creeped out by sick kids. I didn't want to be in a room with a kid who was ill and whatever. I didn't like it. And but then I met this kid, Noah, and he completely changed my life, right?
Yeah.
And so before this project with them, they would be like, no, we don't want to say that you were creeped out by some kids, right? Like, we don't want to put that in there. But what they realized was there's this massive pool of volunteers who feel exactly the same way as this person does. And through this person's story, you can take them on a journey, that emotional journey, through their own issue. And so you have to share that. And it was really powerful, but it also kind of opened up something. But that's the difference, right? Is like the people who sit in the marketing seat are like, oh, we got to tell this nice story all the time. And it's like, no, you want to tell the story that feels real, that actually shows somebody's journey, because that's the journey you want to take other people on. So that's something that I think a lot about with associations, and is where do people find value, and different people are going to find value in different places. And the other, and related to this, is the issue of representation. I can't tell you how many associations are worried about where the next generation of members are going to
Hmm.
come from. And that's because their industries are worried about where the next generation of actually workers are going to come from. And then they don't show any of those people. And it's like, if you want to attract a young member, show me some young members getting
Yeah.
value. That's what's going to attract a young member. And so, it becomes a how do we tell the stories of the things we want to see more of, and what does that look like?
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking, sort of the old adage, nobody will be able to sell for a company better than the founder. And in the same right, I'm never going to be able to tell your story, Michael, better than you would, right? Why would I stand up and try to tell your stories just as an association trying to stand up and tell a member's story? So the concept that I'm hearing is let the members tell their own stories. That's the realest it's going to be. It's the most passion that's ever going to come through, the most genuine truth that will ever come through in terms of the messaging. You can't
Yeah,
you
and you
can't
could,
replicate that.
and you can't make it up, right?
Right.
Like, you don't know. Like, I can't tell you how many times we've had somebody say, "I met this person at the association, and they've become, my best friend for life," or something. Or, "I met this
Yeah.
person at the association, which introduced me to my future career." You don't know those stories unless you're asking people for those stories. And so, that's real power to demonstrate for others what's possible.
Yeah. And for some associations, right, I mean, advocacy is always a big thing, right? It's a big value prop of a lot of associations. But others, it's about the connections, it's about the members. And if you're going to go to an event, for example, I'm not going to meet the association, I'm going to meet the members. And so I don't walk away thinking, wow, what a great job this association did necessarily. It's those interactions. Who did I meet? What friends, colleagues, new business partners did I connect with, either in the hall, at the bar, after event? Like those are the things that are most memorable and most meaningful.
Yeah, and that's more true today after COVID than before. I think COVID taught us all that we don't have to get on an airplane to take a class. We don't have to I need some continuing education credits. I don't need to fly to Las Vegas to do that. So that other part of it, that human part of it, is so much more important than it was before. And I think the trend that is just at the beginning that I think we need to see more of is more deliberate um, networking and connecting of people. I think, the lazy the lazy networking has been, I call it alcohol and extroverts. It's like, we're going to have a happy hour and throw people in a room and hope that people talk to each other. And it's like, okay, we need to be more intentional about that part of it. How do we create, because I'll give you a great example. There's a woman named Gina Bianchini who runs a company called Mighty Networks, and Mighty Networks is a platform for communities. And she's done a lot of research onto why do some communities are really vibrant and successful and others not. And she found a single point that is like 90% of the difference between communities that are successful and not. And I think it's absolutely applicable to the association world. That single point is, the more that members of the community connect to each other, the more vibrant the community is. And it has nothing to do with content being pushed at people. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's all about building that web of connection between people. And I think that associations have to take that responsibility like to the next level, and that it could have a real powerful impact on their revenue and their events and their membership and everything else.
Yeah, I've always thought, there's a lot of associations that put out content, put out newsletters, and I want to get us off track. I'm going to bring us back after this comment. But the content that goes out more regularly, in my opinion, that comes from members, that's not association written, it's association sourced from membership, is much more powerful, much more interesting. I want to hear what other members in the industry doing. I don't want to hear necessarily all the time just from my association, because again, it feels like the really long form polished video that is there bias in this, or I'd rather just hear directly from members to members, which is why a lot of folks go to the events and do that. But to bring us back, I want to zoom back out in a second, but let's get tactical for just a couple minutes. So how does Gather Voices actually work? Like what am I doing with the platform? What are members doing? sort of roll it out for us.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, Gather Voices lets the association create a prompt for a member, and that prompt can be for anything. It could be for membership, for advocacy, could be, and it's usually very specific, whatever that very specific thing is that they want content for. And that prompt includes things like a time limit and talking points. And so it's essentially a guide for that member to make a video. And then that prompt can be shared in a bunch of different ways. It can be shared with an email and a link. It can be embedded into an existing workflow, and that we see really successful. So somebody's filling out the form for this legislative fly-in. Well, they're thinking about the legislative fly-in. That's a great time to ask them an advocacy question to do on video. And so when the end user or the member clicks on that link, the software walks them through making the video the association wants on their own device, their own webcam or their own phone. So the software checks their lighting and sound, gives them time limits, talking points, has them sign the legal release, and then automatically, without them having to do anything or figuring out how to use Dropbox or YouTube or anything, it automatically sends the video back to the association. And then we've built a whole backend to help the association folks who are not experts in video editing or video whatever use that content. So the admin with a few clicks can add branding, add captions, multilingual captions, add a call to action, create a montage, publish to social media, create a gallery, lots of fix the sound, like all replace the background of the video, like all kinds of things in a kind of Canva-like experience, that's point and click, super easy, and also automated. We can do a lot of automated things. So you can say every video that comes in for this awards thing gets this awards branding on it automatically, and we don't actually have to do anything. So the idea is not only to get better content from members by coaching them through the process with software, but also making it much easier for the team to utilize that content without a lot of, expertise or vendors or anything like that.
Yeah. So I've had the luxury of going through the demo and looking at all these cool features that you're talking about. And what I took away was you've really created the easy button for people who haven't done a lot of video content creation, maybe be concerned about what am I going to say? What about my lighting? Is it going to look professional? And so a lot of those elements I feel like you've touched on, right there. It is, hey, it's going to tell me what to do. It's going to walk me through it. If I need to make an adjustment to this or that, it's going to tell me. It's pretty low pressure. And so when you lower the barrier to entry, you increase both the volume and the quality. And I say the quality because as people feel more comfortable, the content's going to be more genuine. It's going to be more real.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think a big learning for us is that the less specific you are, the more that what the organization wants from the person isn't clear, the less likely anybody is to try anything at all, right? Like it's you send something, you're like, make a video, and it's like, do you mean me? First of all, do you mean me? Because you just sent that to the entire membership or something, which is not a good idea. And yeah, what am I supposed to say and what kind of video? And the more you can model that and the more you can say, here's something really specific, the more likely people are relaxed about it. Oh, I can do that. And so one of the features of the product is a video introduction to that prompt. So imagine having someone that you might recognize, the CEO of the organization or somebody who runs, volunteering or membership, saying, hey, thanks for coming to make a video. Here's what we want you to talk about. And that intro does a couple things. It tells the person what you want them to do, but it also models that it's not that hard to do it because they're watching a video just like that, before they start.
So aside from just having a lot more content, right? I mean, it feels like this is great. This is something that marketing needs to have. How do you describe to an association the ROI? Why am I doing this? And you touched on a couple of different, I think you said marketing, we've talked about events, you mentioned advocacy. So maybe through that lens, talk about some of those use case areas, like how would different departments, if you will, within an association be able to utilize Gather Voices?
So we do a lot with events, and with events, we have another way to collect content. So not just to send people a link. So, imagine pre-event content, you can get speakers and sponsors and attendees to share things. But during the event, we also we had clients come to us, and all of this, all the features we have is really built on what customers have asked us for. And so we had a customer years ago say, hey, we're getting all this content, but we have this event and we're going to have, 1,000 people in the same place, and we want to collect content there, and we don't want to use our phones. We want a consistent quality. Can you help us with that? And so we built the Gather Voices video kiosk, which is essentially off the shelf hardware. It's running our software on an iPad, a ring light, external microphone. And our clients are collecting 30 to 50 videos per event day. And every video is on the cloud, branded, captioned, ready to share without the weeks of post-production and waiting for something to happen. And so I'll talk about the ROI of that for a second, is we spend a lot at events in general. They're very expensive, and the AV part of events is very expensive.
It is.
It's become, the biggest line item almost. And it's important to have people have a really good experience, to give them that wow. But we think it's important to walk away with some stuff that you can use other than those 3 days, right? And so for a fraction, for a tiny marginal additional cost with Gather Voices, our clients can collect content from members that they're going to use all year long. I'll give you an example. Just today, I looked on the ASAE LinkedIn, and I saw a video from the person who's like the head of Visit Atlanta, or Atlanta Convention Bureau. And it was, it's basically a shout out to a partner. They call it, I think, lead from the front and stuff. And that video's there. Well, that video was captured at ASA Annual, which was 6 months ago or more, right? So the idea is like we can actually capture content that we can put in the can and utilize. And so one really clear ROI thing is folks like ASAE are using video for sponsorship and charging for it. So, if I do a lot of exhibiting at events, and if somebody comes to me and says, Michael, we can take a video of you in front of your booth branding, and we're going to drip that out on social media months after the event, and that's a little plus up to your experience, I'm all in for that, because I want to get as much exposure to that community as possible. If they say to me, Michael, you can do one of the countdown videos 30 days before the event, so your face and your voice and your name is in front of everybody who's attending before they arrive, I'll say, I love that. I'll pay a little more for that, right?
Yeah.
So those are ROI things that are really clear. And I think, in the other areas that we work, membership, advocacy, continuing education. So continuing education is very much like a conference. So we've just proven over and over again that if you take an instructor for a webinar or course that you're doing, and you have them say, hey, I'm Michael, I'm teaching this course, here's what it's about, it's going to be really interesting, and you put that on the course registration page and you send it out in an email, you're going to get more registrations from that than you would with just a big block of text.
And it didn't cost you $50,000, right?
Exactly. It's really, I do this exercise when I'm working with clients, is like, let's go look at, a few random associations, continuing education pages, and 9 out of 10 of them are just these big blocks of text with like a price and like a description.
Yeah,
and
don't make me puke on the show, please, Michael.
Well, and I think increasingly associations are competing with non-associations that can A, bring people together, B, give educational products, and so we got to up our game here a bit. And the idea is you don't need a lot of expertise or expense to do that. You can do that with really basic stuff. Again, an instructor talking about it is enough. And I'll give you another example on the advocacy side. Advocacy is like one of the greatest member engagement strategies as well, right? Somebody who's really juiced about advocating is going to know that they can advocate through that organization, and that's going to create a really strong bond. But how many people can come to that DC fly-in? Think about the effort and the expense and all that stuff to get people in person. It's important. It works. It's really good. But imagine being able to walk into those members' offices with iPads all year long and say, hey, Lucas couldn't be here today, but he recorded this video that I want to show you, and he's a constituent. Like,
Amazing,
that's no brainer
right?
kind of stuff to do.
Well, I like, just pulling on the thread of one thing you said, which I think is really important, is associations are competing with for-profits, and even for-profits that are very small individuals that have no more than a cell phone, that have just learned how to do social media, how to garner attention, how to put out mass amounts of quantity of content, and they could, I say, steal the spotlight, right? They could take a larger portion of the spotlight, and members' attention may be turned away from the educational sessions of an association because this seems like it's a bigger thing, even if it's not. And even if the content isn't even as good. And you can take this from industry to industry, and you see it if you just go on Instagram or Facebook, where a single individual, hey, I'm going to have an event and there's going to be hundreds of people, and they make it seem like there's thousands of people. And then at the last minute lately, yank, the whole thing gets canceled for, one reason or another. And, it's a swing and a miss. But associations, we're competing with that.
Yeah,
So we
and
have
think
to step
about
up
it.
our game, to your point.
Yeah, think about the association business model is like 150 years old, and we needed that to get together. There was no other way to get education, to meet other people in your thing. Everything was in person. You had these, very formal structures that people needed. And in
Yep.
the world of Facebook groups and, all this content and people's ability to self-organize, like, we can't just do what we were doing 150 years ago.
Exactly. And what a missed opportunity for an association who's been around for 50 or 100 years to miss the mark on sharing all of that credibility as part of their promotion, to say, if I have the opportunity to go to this private event or go to the association's event, who's got 100 years of history, knows my industry, should know my industry better than everybody else, advocates for me, and has a voice on the Hill, and is organized, shouldn't I go with that if it's marketed the
Yeah,
same?
and I think one of the
Tie goes to the association, if you will.
I would think so. I think one of the watch outs for associations is that it can feel like an old boys club sometimes, right? The people who've shown up for the last 10 years at the event and all know each other. And, there's a certain piece when you're in that, which both of us, I'm sure, have been,
Yeah.
it's great. But if you think, oh, we need to be vibrant, we need to attract new people, you really have to think about that new member experience, that new event attendee experience. How do they feel that? How do they feel embraced? How do they feel visible? How do they feel welcome? And short form video is a great way to do that, right? Again, lifting up the voices in a way that's not as complicated as many other things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know you didn't just like snap your fingers and we've reached today and success has happened. Like, could you share with us a misstep along the way of your journey, that something you learned from?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm as somebody who started several companies over many years, I've had many many missteps, and I always think, oh, if when I was 25 and I did that thing, I wish I knew, this thing that I know now. But for Gather Voices, I think one of my and I think you'll appreciate this because we were, talking about venture capital and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
One of the mistakes that I made was that when we started Gather Voices and we started talking to investors, the investors are super strident about software over services,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they say, a SaaS company is better because you have recurring revenue, and that recurring revenue is like it's like an annuity, and and your margins are good on software theoretically. And so, stay away from services. And that is so not right for the association world in particular. A world where you can't just say, here's some tech, figure it out. There's not enough people, there's not enough resource, there's not enough time. There's, and in some organizations that maybe there's not enough imagination or whatever, they
Yeah,
need help.
it's true.
And so, I think if this is something we're just remediating as a company is saying we need to offer a service layer that makes sense to make the software do what it can do for the organization. And increasingly, and the event industry helped us figure that out, because after COVID, so many people left the event industry because there was no jobs, and a lot of those people didn't come back. And so being short staffed has been a thing. And we were like, we're software, take the software, we'll show you how to do it, but you do it yourself.
Right.
And over the last couple of years, we've had so many people say, look, we don't have the staff to run this at our event, or we need help to implement this advocacy thing, like, can you help us with it? And we've had to really start to think about what does that look like baked in. So I think that's something. And I was talking to another entrepreneur who's getting the same message again from the financial people, and I'm sure you've heard it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. The association's uniqueness of typically small staff, multiple hats. You're asking them to, again, run a new initiative, a new project that's going to take somebody's time, and it's very difficult for them to say, well, what are we going to drop? Or are we going to add a staff person, which is even sometimes more of an issue from a budget perspective. So the idea that, one, it's very intuitive, that the platform comes with the instructions, if you will, baked in, but then there's a service component that that they can, they're going to get the support and service along with it. But yeah, 100%. You got to watch out. Choose wisely on the VC conversation, I guess, maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, to piggyback on the mistake, maybe we'll transition to some fun stuff. What's something that ends up on Michael's calendar every year? It's, you're pulling up your 2025 or 2026 calendar, and you're like, this one's going in first, and then we'll build around it in most cases.
Most of the time, it's the same thing that's in that poster behind you. Jazz Fest, New Orleans Jazz Fest is my favorite thing in the world. It is such a unique, multi-generational space with all different kinds of music. People are like, jazz. It's not a jazz thing. It's like an everything thing, a roots music, and I just love it. It makes me feel good to be there. And I have not been able to make it every year, but I've been able to make it a lot of years. And there's just nothing better than being there with friends and enjoying the music. And there's just something so I don't know. It's an elevated experience. I mean, even like the food level of the food, right, is like at a completely different level than another kind of event. And there's a lot of space there. So if you feel like you don't want to be squinched in, like I've seen these pictures.
Unless the Rolling Stones are there, like they were.
Yeah, or I saw like Stevie Nicks or something. It was pretty crazy, right? But
yeah, not to age the video, but Pearl Jam will be there this year.
But you can still walk. If you want, you could still walk away from that and go to some root stage and see some unbelievable musician.
Yeah,
I've
been introduced to countless new artists just by doing that same thing. Walk away from the main stage, walk to one of the ancillary stages, sit there and listen to something new, sort of an up and coming or kind of a no-name local artist, even in some cases, and. Yeah, that goes on my calendar first as well. That's the first guest I've been able to share that answer with, and we're usually booked by October. And
right, and they don't even release the list of bands till later. But you got to prepare. You just got to go, and it doesn't really matter who's there because you always know Shorty will be there, right?
That's right. He'll cap it off on Sunday, and you always get Shorty on the end, and it's going to be good. And there's. Yeah, you're right. The food is great. The atmosphere is great. Usually around that time of year, the weather's great. I mean, I've been there when it was bleeding hot, and I've been there when they had the monsoon and the whole thing flooded.
I was there too with the flooding. I think, in the blues tent, and it was up to my knees.
Yeah, I was watching Stevie Wonder, and the sound's going off. The lights are going off. Get out of here. There's big metal poles in the middle of this bandstand and there's a bunch of water and lightning. We should probably leave.
And I always rent bikes and ride from wherever, and So I remember riding home in the months, you know,
Oh, geez.
with a drink, you know, on the bike, you know.
That's how you do it. That's how you do it. Well, we could talk about that one for a while.
Yeah.
What about favorite social media platform and why?
We focused from a business perspective on LinkedIn a lot, and I think, you know, LinkedIn, I've met really great people there and connected to people who then I get to connect to in real life, and you know, that's been powerful. I used to in the I'm a veteran of the very original early social media stuff. And you know, early on, Twitter was amazing. I created the most incredible relationship with Twitter, and that is just a show to, you know, excuse my French, today. So I'm off of there. And then, you know, I've been playing around with TikTok a bit, and I find that I don't know what they've figured out around these dopamine hits from the algorithm, but it's not healthy. So I love it, but it's not good.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you could sit there and it's like, oh, 4 hours go by or something. I mean,
Yeah.
it's completely
Doom
insane.
scrolling or whatever they call it. Yeah.
But you know, I've really tried to focus on LinkedIn and not just posting on LinkedIn, but thoughtfully commenting on things that people are doing and really, you know, trying to build those relationships there because, you know, and also just lifting up people who maybe aren't as visible as I am there because there's a lot of really smart and interesting people and,
Absolutely.
you know, want to just share their content.
Yeah. I mean, with every platform, you kind of have to sift through it a little bit and then, you know, work your feed so that, you know, unfollow this. This wasn't for me, you know, blah, blah, blah. But then you get down to some really good stuff and engaging on that platform, I found to be really useful from a business standpoint. And personally, made some great connections there as well, finding the right folks and kind of getting together and talking about different partnerships, opportunities. A lot has come from that for us. What about, I'll wrap us up with this one. What about something about Michael that we couldn't find on LinkedIn or TikTok or your resume?
I've done a lot of things, and one of those things I did was I was first in my class in law school and dropped out to start internet companies out of Israel.
Oh,
And
wow.
while I was in Israel and started a half a dozen companies, I also was a co-founder of the first multinational internet company in the Arab world. So
Okay.
I had a partner in Jordan, and we did essentially a roll up of internet companies in Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, um, and so I got to, and my partner was kind of a celebrity in the Arab world, so I got to fly around. So I'm this Jewish guy in Israel building the Arab internet company, flying around with royalty, and that was an experience,
Not a
and
bad
one that I
time.
have not talked very much about because you know, it's complicated.
Feels like a life ago. Do you make it back at all?
I've been able to go back to Israel a few times, and to Egypt. So I created relationships in Cairo where we've built for 25 years. I've had our software development team in Cairo. So I met somebody that became my partner in building a software company, and we've got, you know, 40 people in an office in Cairo, who are the brains and back end behind the coding of Gather Voices, but also the back end of several different agencies who support associations and nonprofits.
That's fascinating. That is definitely something I did not find on the internet or know about Michael. So thanks for sharing, and thanks for the time, Michael. I have to wrap us up, but before we go, I'd love to hear: is there somebody within your network you think our audience would benefit from hearing from as much as you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people, but one that comes to mind is Vinu Deschetti, who is somebody who works with associations, but is in the event industry, and she's just gone out on her own, helping people sift through the world of event tech, and I think that's so needed. It's like, you know, we get the shiny object syndrome for like features and stuff, and she's somebody with a lot of experience who's helping organizations figure out like what do you really need and how's that going to work? But she's got some great war stories of being in the association event industries that I think would be quite compelling for your audience.
Wonderful. Well, we look forward to reaching out. And again, thanks, Michael, for the time. I know it's precious.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me.